Welcome, fellow druids. I had some requests, or actually asked for some requests for some topics, and it was pointed out to me as an example that I have not. It's been a while since I've done reviews on a lot of the a lot of the things in the faction, frankly, but specifically on the the warlocks. They are obviously important. Obviously, they're the center of your army, and how they play is going to adjust as the game adjusts, right? So some of these, I looked and I started my show like way back in September of 2016, which sounds crazy to me now, but you know, when I started talking through a bunch of the warlocks in late 16, early 17, and now we're into early, quite a ways into early 18, the game has changed a lot. New theme forces have been released. The game itself has moved and, you know, ebbed and flowed in certain ways, and that means some of these casters are going to be in a different place. So I'm going to try to it won't be all at once, but I'm going to try to sort of hit back on some of those. I may not get to all of them, you know, usual caveats. This one in particular, I wanted to talk about because there's a decent likelihood that we will be revisiting him again when the Tharn CID happens, as he is a Tharn. So it'll be interesting to compare and contrast like what I had to say today and what, you know, when these changes go live sometime maybe in the summer, like what that looks like. So I want to talk about Kromac 2 again. We're going to do the usual. I'm going to go over stats. We'll talk about pros and cons and where I feel like he is, what I think he's good, etc., etc. So Kromac, champion of the Wurm. He's Wurm. He's a circle warlock. He is speed 6, strength 10, mat 8, rat 4, def 14, arm 18, command 8. He has Pathfinder. He's on a large base. He has Fury 7. He has 19 damage points. He has 28 War Beast points. His weapon is Wrathrock, which is a 2-inch range, power and strength 17 magical weapon. In addition, Wrathrock has Grievous Wounds, which I shouldn't have to go over by now. Kromac has the special rules Death Feast, which is during his activation you can spend a Corpse Token to remove D3 damage for each token you opt to spend in that way. He has Field Marshal Hyper Aggressive, which is he doesn't have it, but if a War Beast in his battle group suffers damage, they can advance, unless they're moving, they can advance directly toward the source of that damage. And he has Heart Eater, which I've gone over with the Tharn, but if he destroys a living or undead, and that's important in a lot of cases, enemy model with a melee attack, he'll get a Corpse Token. He can have up to 3. The Corpse Tokens can be used to make additional melee attacks or buy and boost melee attack or damage rolls. 1 at a 1-for-1 rate. His spell list is Awakened Spirit, which is a 2-cost, range 6, friendly upkeep. It's not offensive, that is. Target War Beast in this battle group can cast an Animus once during its activation without being forced. The War Beast that casts Animus as a result of Awakened Spirit cannot also be forced again to do so. Carnage, which costs 2, is ranged self, covers this control area, lasts for a turn, and is not offensive. Friendly faction models gain +2 to melee attack rolls against enemy models in the spellcaster's control range, and lasts for 1 turn. Primal Shock, which costs 2, range control. The POW is star, get to that, and it is offensive. Choose a friendly faction War Beast in the spellcaster's control range. Target a model within 8 inches of the chosen War Beast and make a magic attack against it. The chosen War Beast is the attack's point of origin. If the enemy model is hit, it suffers a damage roll with a POW equal to the War Beast's base strength. And then finally Vengeful, which is target friendly faction model gains Retaliatory Strike. Oh, sorry, it costs 2, range 6, it's an upkeep. Retaliatory Strike just means if when a model is hit by melee attack, after that is resolved, you can hit them back by making a basic melee attack against the model. And you can make 1 per turn. It does not expire. And then his feat is called Bloodlust, which is Kromac immediately casts Carnage without spending Fury. Additionally, while in Kromac's control range, living models in its battle group gets +2 strength and armor, and it lasts for 1 round. Okay. So that's Kromac's stats, right? So what's changed? Where does he fit? The biggest thing that has changed is the Call of the Wild theme force now exists. With Kromac's current rule set, I know there's some people who've done some stuff with him in other themes and played some Wolds with him because there's some synergies with the Woldrath having Vengeful for the knockdown and POW, like 16 Primal Shocks, which are obviously going to be very painful. I'm personally not a fan of that build because I feel it's gimmicky. I know people have had success with it. I know that it can be played well. But personally, I feel like you are leaving too much on the table by not playing to his feat, which only affects living models. So Call of the Wild is great for him because he mostly wants to bring a pretty sizable battle group, in my opinion, because that is because the feat is the most powerful. Sorry, the two things most powerful about Kromac are Kromac himself and his feat. I think you could choose to play him in Devourer's Host and focus on trying to get sort of a minimum amount of Tharn. And I've played this a little bit. It was so-so for me in how it executed. But to get sort of a minimal amount of Tharn models so that he can start the game with 3 corpses, because it makes a pretty considerable difference on how much Kromac himself is able to contribute to the game. So that's one approach. The other approach, and the one I've been playing myself, is the Call of the Wild approach, where you're bringing possibly 100 points of War Beasts, frankly, that you can use to, with that feat, to really gain a massive advantage in the game. If he were allowed in any of the themes, Loki would be a fantastic model for Kromac to bring, as he is not. He currently is not seeing that. Bradigus is, or sorry, not Bradigus. Brenos is allowed in that theme, but so far I don't think he quite fits the bill for something that Kromac is looking for. So what is Kromac looking for? Well, I think a few caveats. One, the Spirit Cauldron from the Minions release, I think slots in here very well. You will lose a free model because as it is, you can bring 100 points and get 4 cards and still have room for 1 Shifting Stone. So you can take 2 Shifting Stones, 2 Black Clouds, and 1 other free solo and still get 100 points, which is what I had been playing. It's what I played at Adepticon, if you followed me talking about it. And I think that plays very well. I actually am a little surprised at how well the list plays. It's to a degree, it's very straightforward. To a degree, I actually, I went over his spells, but Kromac's spells are not bad, but overall the spell list is comparatively very lackluster compared to, when we talk about a lot of other Circle Warlocks. I would actually personally love to see him get trade a spell to get just a little bit more interesting stuff out of his spell list, but be that as it may. Where Kromac is strong, though, is Kromac himself. As I said before, he actually covers a very large control area at 7. He is a 14-18 by himself. You're going to bring Getorix with him almost assuredly, and that's going to give him the ability to be 14-20 on any given turn, or 14-22 on his feat turn, which means you can, much like a lot of Trollcasters play, you can play him very far forward. And you're going to want to, because I think a lot of the strength is, if you look at Kromac himself as basically another heavy War Beast, you're looking at him correctly. He's technically not getting up to like Butcher levels of killing, right? He has a POW 17, where Butcher has a POW 16 Weapon Master attack. On the feet, you're going to outdamage him. Probably you have more Fury, and you can have corpses and stuff, but overall, you're not quite that far, but you are naturally a little faster, naturally have Pathfinder, naturally you have access to Animai, and Carnage will actually improve your ability to hit. So your Mat 8 normally go up to 10, the armor goes up, etc. So it's not a perfect comparison, but you're also, then you have the Circle of Action and a lot of other things. So, Kromac himself is important, and the anima you bring in the list are going to be very important. I think you want access to Lightning Strike. You want access to Spiny Growth. You're going to bring Getorix, in my opinion, pretty much no matter what. I'm not saying you have to, but I really recommend it. You're going to bring Stalker. The change to the Call of the Wild theme to allow your Warbies to cast things for free is incredibly important, because it takes the Stalkers, which were like, they sort of, where they're at in the curve doesn't quite work out as nicely as you might want when you need to pay 1 to Lightning Strike, but if you need to pay 0 to Lightning Strike, it's perfect. Getorix loves a free Spiny Growth. Scarsful Griffin's getting Elusive for free is great in this list. I've had a Wild Argus in the list I've played. 1 cost Doppler Bark has been a very good add. So that's the way you want to be looking at Kromac. You want to look at him as a table bully. Honestly, I think Kromac might possibly be one of the best drops into things like Khador Jack Spam and like Asphyxia's 3 Jack Spam. And the reason being, Kromac, again, looking at Kromac himself as a heavy, you naturally outrange stuff like that. And although not quite on the Slayers, it depends. Your Black Clouds become important. But anyway, but you also end up being naturally resilient against those things as well, because you are higher defense, higher armor. The feat makes you even higher armor. The feat means you trade into there. The feat gives you accuracy with Carnage, things like that. So if you look at, say, Slayers, if you can use your lights to get in the way. My list was Stalker, Feral, Getorix, and then of course you've got Kromac. If you can use your Shifting Stones to keep things off of your battle group a little bit, you can use your lights to get in the way. In fact, with this feat, if you can use Primal on Scarsfell, you're getting POW 16, 15, 15 initials, which is quite good, as you may imagine. That is the strength of something like Kromac. That said, he doesn't have a ton of tricks, right? He's going to sprint away from stuff. He's going to try to hide. He's going to love being behind forests a lot of times to go through them and charge and kill stuff. Or sometimes you're just going to be able to stand in a place, have Spiny, have your feet up, and live. So things of that nature are what you want to really be looking at with Kromac. And I think he does a very good job of it. The one thing where he does fall down is as things start to out-threaten Warpwolves, you are going to have to play very cagey, and it's going to be a lot harder. I don't mean necessarily guns, although if there's a significant number of them, you probably are going to have to feat and hope, or hope that you have enough terrain at least to hide your Stalkers in, and then use Spiny plus feat with Kromac to live. With a caster like this, one thing to keep in mind when you have that strength and armor is you want to evaluate which thing you need more. In a lot of matches like the Warjack Spam type things that I mentioned, both strength and armor are going to be essential to keeping you up and doing enough work. But so like one time I played Kromac into Haley 3, and it was a very strange game because I literally just feated and ran at him and hoped he couldn't kill enough stuff fast enough, and I was right. He didn't even clock, although I think he would have over time, and I needed to play Kromac a little safer. He did end up getting an assassination run that didn't work, but one that I didn't need to give him. But at that point, I'm into his lines. He has to just, he has to try to kill 4 Warpwolves, 2 Lights, and a Argus, and Kromac's still back there too, so and it's Haley 3, so like you're asking them to do a lot of stuff on the clock. Frankly, I probably could have been up on enough time at that point just to win the game that way. So, but point being is recognize when you need the armor part of the feat more than you need the strength or the accuracy, which you can cast Carnage later if you need to. So those are things that I think Kromac's strong with. The Spirit Cauldron I mentioned, so being able to get corpses on Kromac can actually be very strong, because it means now he can do work into melee while being able to camp more or being able to cast more Carnage, maybe throw 1 Primal Shock out there. Awakened Spirit is a relatively meh spell right now, because most of the animi cost 0 or 1 in that list, but I would put it on like your Gorax, or one of your 2-costers, so they can cast it for free. If you do bring a Storm Raptor with them, which is an interesting play, it's good for that Animus to be free. Similarly with Vengeful, it's a pretty just like it's there type spell. If you bring a Wilder, you're going to be able to upkeep one thing for free, so that's not so bad. Getorix, of course, having Spiny and Vengeful can put a pretty big hurt on something that comes in on him, so you're going to be able to dissuade that a little bit. So that's kind of where I usually would recommend putting that. You can actually see some lists of this played by Will Pagani if you go over to the Privateer Press YouTube channel. They've done their weekly rumbles. I think he's played a similar list to what I'm talking about twice. So take a look at that. But in short, that's kind of where Kromac is. That's where I see him living right now in the game. I think it'll be interesting to see what, if any, changes he endures as part of the Tharn CID. I have some things that I think could be interesting. One of the things that's always dismayed me a little bit about Kromac, both Kromacs actually, is that they are they're Tharn, and you'd think that you would want to play Tharn with them, but they don't really do a whole lot to actually support doing that inside of the faction. They're very much War-based casters, which is fine, but you know, thematically it's a little bit unfortunate. I think if Kromac's feat changed from not being battle group, for example, my tune would change very quickly, as this feat as a friendly faction, covering friendly faction models, would be very strong. I have no idea that that's something they would do, but I would appreciate it. If we see Heart Eater change back to just attack, being able to boost attack and damage rolls, which is what it was in Mark II, I think that opens up a few compelling avenues for Kromac as well, since now he's able to boost Primal Shocks more reliably, which is a spell that if I play some more Kromac, I want to see if there are ways I can leverage a little bit better. I don't think it's an every list sort of thing, but I've certainly wondered if there are times where it isn't worth jamming in with like a Scarsfell Griffin or an Argus that I can then use to boost, you know, to kill support solos as needed. Things like that. So in short, that's where Kromac's at right now. We will certainly revisit again if he does see some changes when the Tharn CAD happens. Of course, it's now mid-April, and I'm not really expecting that till late May, early June at this point. So we're about 6 weeks out from that, and that's based on my estimate. So you know, nothing to quote there. He's straightforward. I think Kromac has gotten a bad name because he doesn't really feel to a lot of people that he brings enough to the table. And looking at him, he feels very linear and bland. But I think the real strength in playing Kromac 2 is taking advantage of the bully that is Kromac 2 within the Circle faction. So I'll leave you with that. As always, thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, join the conversation in my Facebook group, my Full Circle Facebook group, or on the Discord. Links are in the chat, or on Twitter, Cheddar Caveman. Or you can throw some comments up on the notes here as well. If you like the content, subscribe, share. Feel free to share it out on other places on social media, and we'll catch you next time.